Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Today, it's time. Part 2 of the series finale of Countermeasures. The new Countermeasures, the Dalek Gambit. Released in April of 2020, written by Roland Moore, directed by Ken Bentley. The Dalek Gambit stars Pamela Salem as Professor Rachel Jensen, Simon Williams as Group Captain Ian Gilmore, Karen Gledhill as Dr. Allison Williams, and Hugh Ross as Sir Toby Kinsella. Also featured in the cast are Carolyn Seymour, Cyril Imrie, and Nicholas Briggs as the Daleks. As always, I do these unscripted, so there is a blanket spoiler warning in place. And even more so now because I am talking about the end of the series. So if you do not wish to be spoiled, then here is your chance to pause. In the description box below is the link to Big Finish's website, where you can purchase the new countermeasures, the Dalek Gambit. And this is a decent conclusion to the series. More so, it's really good. You know, I've said that about a lot of stories in this range, but it's really good. I think it's one of Big Finish's most underrated spin-offs. Especially because, you know, it's being discontinued due to poor sales. But, you know, aside from that, no one talks about it. It's a series I wish more people knew about. That's why I started these reviews. And this story is a good, like I just said, is a good way to end the series. Not perfect. I do have some issues. But I think of the two-parter, because, you know, we had the first story written by John Dorney, and then we have this story written by Roland Moore. I do think this one is mostly better. There are some issues. For the most part, well, actually my biggest issue, Roland Moore's writing is solid. For the most part, it's his dialogue that I kind of have an issue is, but because it's not a lot of the story, thank God, but there are several instances where he has the characters overstating the obvious, or where he's having them talk about what's happening in front of them. You know, one of those things you don't want to do in an audio. You want to clearly depict the action, or you want to suggest what's going on. You never want your character, and you know, you might need to use the dialogue to kind of help convey that, but you never want your characters to say, oh wow, look at this thing happening in front of me as it happens. And unfortunately in this story, the one weak point of this story overall is that Moore falls into that trap quite a few times. So the team is picking up from the aftermath of the Magellan maneuver. Lady Suzanne Clare, along with Commander Valen, have left to lick their wounds. Meanwhile, the team is trying to, as I just said, pick up the pieces and wrap this investigation up, including looking for robotics experts that Lady Clare sought the assistance of. Except the experts are turning up dead. And, of course, well, we know what's going on. It's in the title. We know that the Daleks have detected the presence of the Magellans on Earth and are looking for them and their accomplices. Of course, the countermeasures team... And it's interesting because until the last act of this story, the countermeasures team is kind of in the middle. Because, you know, you have the Magellans and then you have the Daleks, two races locked in an intergalactic war. And both of them antagonists. That was one of the things that, you know, was introduced in Destiny of the Daleks, the fourth Doctor story they first appeared in. The Magellans may be fighting the Daleks, but they are not the good guys. At most, you will have an enemy of my enemy situation with them. And that's kind of what happens here. But again, the third act, I want to talk about that a little more when we get there, because I do really want to talk about that ending. That ending, I have a love-hate relationship with. Once again, the performances are all solid. From Hugh Ross trying to stick up from his team, and this really wonderful scene where he straight up threatens the Magellans, to Karen Gledhill, who does really good. Carolyn Seymour is fantastic, as always, as Lady Clare. Although I do feel like, of the 4 stories she's had, so, you know, A Gamble with Time from New Countermeasures Series 1, The Enemy of My Enemy from New Countermeasures Series 2, The Magellan Maneuver, and now The Dalek Gambit, this is her weakest story, just because there's not really a lot for her to do. Carolyn Seymour still chews scenery and steals the show, but you get a sense that they Lady Suzanne Clare is only here for plot convenience. Like, there's things she does just to push the plot forward. And then, of course, she just nopes out of the second half of the story right before the climax, only to show up again in the final scene. Again, I'm going to hint towards how this story ends, but I will actually talk about it when the time is right. Going on the performances, so, Ciro Imrie is really good. Actually, one thing else I will say is this story has a really small cast. Like, in other stories you can kind of tell because they'll list all the leads and then they'll say other parts played by members of the cast. This one, you really feel how small the cast is. Like, Cyril Imrie is not just playing Commander Valen, he's playing all the Mavellans. Which is also a really interesting idea because the Mavellans are a robot race. So, and yet, as we saw in Destiny of the Daleks and other stories the Mavellans have been in, they all have different appearances. So, being a robot race and thus being manufactured, having one person play all of them is a really interesting idea. And of course, as Commander Valen, the one we get the real focus on, he's really good. But as far as performances go, hands down, this is Pamela Salem's story. She's been amazing throughout this series, let me say. Like, I said this at the beginning, and I don't know how often it came up as I talked about the series through these reviews, but Rachel is my favorite character in this series. And she gives one of her best performances as the character in this story. How do I want to say it? Like, so in my last review, The Mavellan Maneuver, I kind of talked about this a little bit. There's this plot point popping up where Rachel briefly mentioned how she liked doing research on her own. She didn't really like taking orders from people. And it's kind of continuing here, she's not in the bad way. She's not disagreeing with Toby. She's not rebelling like she did in the early part of the original series. But she's kind of reached this point of, what am I doing with my life? And Salem plays it so well, and God, that ending! I feel like I'm giving it away by just hinting at it so often, especially with that, but, I need to talk about that ending separately, too. Right behind Pamela Salem is giving a stellar performance and just stealing the show across this entire story is Simon Williams as Ian Gilmore. He goes toe-to-toe with Pamela Salem, and they're both spectacular in this story. Once again, especially towards the end. Like I said, this, more than any other story in this set, in this entire series, this story really ships Ian and Rachel. I've talked about that before, and I'll say it here, it leans really heavily into that, and just a lot of the things Ian goes through as well. Williams' performance is just phenomenal. The Daleks are really well handled here. I think part of that is the inverse ninja theory. I'm sure you've seen this in action stories. You'll see our main character encounter a very powerful foe. A foe it takes a lot of effort to defeat, and possibly at a great cost. And then suddenly you'll face an entire army of these foes, and suddenly you can just mow them down. For plot conveniences, the more of a powerful enemy you have, the easier they are to defeat, whereas the less you have, the more difficult they are. That's the inverse ninja theory, and I feel like that happens a lot with the Daleks. I feel like the Daleks could, despite the name, I feel like the Daleks could be the poster child for the inverse ninja theory. But they are really well handled here. Like, it's not a full-on army. Despite the Daleks and Mavellans being at war, it's just a scouting force of 6 Daleks. Yeah, Gilmore says 6 specifically when he and Allison get captured by them. And I was really nervous about this story going in. Let me begin, because the Daleks are my least favorite monster in Doctor Who due to sheer oversaturation. But also because and also it's a nice touch because, ending this story with the Countermeasures team facing the Daleks. A nod to the Countermeasures team's debut, the 7th Doctor story, Remembrance of the Daleks. But I have this weird thing about Daleks in spin-offs, It's just because Doctor Who has built up the Daleks to be one of the ultimate threats to the universe. Nigh unstoppable. In fact, in most cases, the Doctor is one of the only people in the universe who has ever defeated the Daleks. And just depending on the spin-off, I'm always iffy about using the Daleks because, okay, if you have someone who is not the Doctor capable of defeating the Daleks, that kind of lessens the severity of their threat. At least that's how I view it. And there are some exceptions. For example, any of the spin-offs featuring the Master, if the Master were to defeat the Daleks. Okay, I could see that feasibly. Or any of the Time Lords, really. Thankfully, it's not that big a problem here. It's not as big a problem as I worried it would be, because again, it's not an entire army. It's a scouting force of 6 Daleks. And, for the most part, and while the countermeasures team, combined with the military, do defeat the Daleks, it is at great cost with great effort. Again, playing into the inverse ninja theory. And even for the most part, the Movellans do most of the heavy lifting. So, thankfully, my fears concerning the threat level of the Daleks were assuaged. Yeah, the new countermeasures, the Dalek Gambit, is a great send-off for this series. And it does so in a way that, if they wanted to, they could potentially do more. So now we got to talk about that ending. And, oh boy, this ending. Like I said, I both love it and hate it. I have a really love-hate relationship, and I don't know which way I quite fall. So, when a Dalek, so towards in the third act of the story, a Dalek is dispatched to the Movellan ship while Toby and Rachel try to convince the Movellans to help them defeat it. When the Dalek is defeated, the remaining Daleks decide to take no chances and deploy a bomb that will destroy all life on Earth. After Commander Valen is killed, Rachel decides to defuse the bomb. And here, the Dalek ship, small detail about this, the Dalek ship has been cloaked by a force field. And, and every time the Daleks have to use a transmat or teleport, they have to disengage the force field. So everyone theorizes that if you put up the force field, it should be enough to shield the effects of the bomb. Rachel stays behind because she knows to leave she would have to disengage the force field, which would leave the ship open and allow the bomb to detonate and wipe out the Earth. She stays behind trying to defuse the bomb. And she fails. Rachel dies. In a really brutal scene. This is where some of the best acting in this series comes from. Just Ian, Allison, and Toby watching this Dalek ship blow up. And then we cut to the aftermath. Ian has taken some time off, and he sort of squirreled himself away in hiding, just absolutely devastated that Rachel is gone. When Allison and Toby find him and tell him, "We can't mourn forever. We have to get back to work." And then we cut to Lady Suzanne Clare, who is continuing her hunt for alien technology. Remember, she is an alien arms dealer, and she finds her teleport ring. Yeah, kind of a small detail about that. Small plot point that didn't really come up to talk about. Lady Suzanne Clare has her own personal teleport ring. Anyway, she finds this ring, and Rachel is alive. And this is where my love-hate thing with the ending comes from. Because, it feels... Because, Rachel's death, that death was amazing. It was so well done. It was so well acted. And it was properly devastating. And then, of course, she's alive. It kind of feels like they chickened out. It kind of feels like they backtracked. But at the same time, I can kind of get it. Because if they ever do get the chance to continue countermeasures, they have a method of doing so. And also, I can't fault Rachel's reasoning entirely. Because like I said, throughout the Movellan maneuver and the Dalek Gambit, she's reached this point of, what's happened to my life? Where am I going? I have no clue what I want to do, but I know I can't keep doing this forever. So, she has this scene with Lady Claire, where she explains, I had to fake my death because dying was the only way to get out of countermeasures. Fresh starts come with a price. And like I said, there are times when I like that Rachel's alive, and she basically, for lack of a better phrase, chose to go out on her terms. And then there are times when I think that was a little ridiculous. Like it feels like chickening out. Like they should have ended just a scene earlier on, the team trying to move on after Rachel had died. But those are just my thoughts. The Dalek Gambit is a decent end to this story. Like I said, most of my issues are very small nitpicks. And I'm just sad this series is over. Like, I spent so long with this series. It's one of my favorite spin-offs. I hope so badly that you people watching have decided to pick it up. But those are just my thoughts on the Dalek Gambit and across the series as a whole. What are yours? Please start a conversation in the comments below. As for what's coming up next, I don't have anything set in stone. I'm not going to set myself to a schedule yet. I want to do a ranking of all the countermeasure stories, but as of right now, not counting multi-part stories as one story, there are 6 box sets. Countermeasure Series 1, 2, 3, 4. New Countermeasure Series 1 and 2. And then there are 4 individually released stories. Who Killed Toby Kinsella, The Hollow King, The Magellan Maneuver, and The Dalek Gambit. That leads to a combined total of 28 stories. So if I do a ranking, it's going to take some time for me to put together and put out. And honestly, at 28 stories, it might not even be one video. It might be multiple videos. Right now, I'm thinking I could possibly do it in 2. We'll see what happens, though. Other things coming up. I'm recording this at the end of February. It will release about 2/3 of the way through March, if I've got that right. So, April, we've got the Doctor Who Easter special, Legend of the Sea Devils. There will be a review on that. And then, as for what's next, I don't know for sure. A little while ago, I put out a poll on Twitter saying, once I finished Countermeasures, what spin-off series should I review? And the choices were Iris Wildtime and Vienna. Iris Wildtime won that poll, but here's the thing. I started listening to it. It's a good series, but I just don't have a lot to say about it. So I'm probably not going to go forward with that idea. I'm sorry. Like I said, really good, really funny. Check it out, but just not a lot to say about it. I might do Vienna, though, still. We'll see. Other than that, the only other thing I think I'm going to do is, because, I took a hiatus at the end of the year, end of 2021, and I missed a release in doing that. And now that the last 2 are out, I will try to do the last 2 releases of the 9th Doctor Adventures. Volume 3, Old Friends, and Volume 3, Lost Warriors, and Volume 4, Old Friends, and try to get those done before the 9th Doctor Adventures Series 2 releases. Other than that, I have nothing else to say. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. And in the description box below, along with the link to the Big Finish website, you'll find the link to my Twitter where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.